Welcome to the No Limits Leadership Podcast. We discuss ancient wisdom, real-world experiences, and the latest concepts on mastering leadership of self and others. If you're committed to maximizing your life and your impact on the world, you're home. Welcome to No Limits Leadership. I am your host, Sean Patton, and I am so excited to be with Jen Halpern, who is the founder of Soft Sell Coaching. She's an expert in leadership development and sales in leadership, especially around compassionate and relationship-driven sales techniques. So, Jen, thanks for being here. We met just a few months ago, and I feel like we're besties at this point.
I love it. Yes, we did. We met at a business development conference. That one of the reasons this is an opportunity to promote those two sales conferences, business development conferences. They're so unique because they incorporate the importance of, call it compassionate selling or humanizing, the importance of being authentic for the purpose of building long-term trusted referral partners. So yeah, I'm all about it. It was great to meet you. And now we're in touch on the regular. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shout out to Catherine Brown and the Good Humans Growth Network.
That's it.
A good friend of mine and a speaker and presentation coach here in Nashville, his name is Bill Gannon. He's been on the podcast before. And he actually, we were having coffee as we do every few months. And he said, "Hey, I'm emceeing this conference. I know it's down in Houston, but if you can make it, you need to go. I think they're your people." And it just so happens I have a client down there. So I was able to schedule my client session with the conference. And I was so glad I did because, like you mentioned, like Catherine has set up with that Good Human Growth Network. I have never been to a conference with that quality of human or that person, like across the board, right? Like you go to a conference, you meet one or two people. I connect with this person or that person or that person, but it was like across the board. Like everyone I met was, it was on brand.
I love it. Yes. And it happens, just for your audience, it happens every year in February and in September. So folks have the opportunity to check it out. And Bill Gannon, there's a powerful king also, right? If you need a presentation reviewed, right? He will coach you. Amazing, authentic humans. And that's what I love about this kind of a community when you say your people. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what inspired you to create Soft Sell Coaching?
I'm going to get vulnerable just right out of the gate. I was a VP of sales for a software company, and I believe that coaching is up there with dashboard reporting, with documenting in your CRM. I mean, coaching shows that you consistently invest in your people, and the more you invest in your people, the better they perform. So consistent, repeatable coaching, regardless if they're older, have more experience, because you bring different perspectives to the party. And I was a VP of sales. I was so honored and excited. And I'd been there about just 6 months. And I came home one night and my daughter said to me, "Mama, you say you love your job, but why do you come home so angry every night?" And that's a moment where I describe it as a hug and a punch. Because I had no idea how I was showing up. Here's my 12-year-old kid who's way more observant, tapped into my humanity than I'm even aware, like a deep level of awareness. And it really threw me for a loop. And I talked to my hubby at the time and we had like a family conference. And I said, I can't keep doing this. So that we agreed. I went to my CEO and I said, let's exit me. This is not, And that was a pivotal moment because I believe in leveling people up. I believe in the importance of authentic listening and the power of asking authentic, difficult questions, which make people uncomfortable, but that's where change happens. So all of that to say, that led to soft sell coaching. So leaving corporate for good, I made that decision and opening up soft sell coaching. And that's what I do. Yeah, I love it.
What was that decision like for you to say the right decision for me is to exit and do my own thing because I'm not happy in this culture, it's not fulfilling, versus do you invest and try to change the organization to be the standard that you want? Like, what was that decision like in that experience?
So this was 21 years in corporate America. And one particular opportunity, I stayed at a company for 13 years and through multiple acquisitions and mergers. And it was, as I look back, not with regret, but with thoughtful reflection, I likely stayed there 5, 6 years longer than was probably good for me, for my own momentum and growth. And part of that is looking back, I am aware that I started to get cynical, and maybe it was, and I've had some amazing bosses and some terrible bosses, but the overarching is that I was feeling more and more and more that I could bring less of my gifts, such as coaching people up, and more of staying in my lane, staying in sort of a box. And that's the best decision I ever made, was realizing it's scary. That means, how long might I go without a consistent paycheck and without benefits, and walking away from golden handcuffs where you've got a nice salary plus your OTE is very scary. But so is dying early of stress and becoming a person where my kid has to say to me, why do you come home angry every night? So all of those things, I was like, when I step away, I'm going in all in. Next, I'm going all in. And that's what I've done. Now, I got really lucky because when I left corporate, I had one paying client, and I had no idea at the time what a amazing opportunity that was. So that helped. So don't know if that answered the question or that was too much fueled coffee talk. I'll pause.
No, that was beautiful. Hey, there's no right answers here.
Okay.
You mentioned, you had great bosses and bad bosses. What was the difference between those two for you?
What is the level of candor allotted on this podcast?
100%, 100%. We
100%.
can we can bleep you if we need to.
There you go. That's where I was headed. Okay. I'm going to start with a poor example of a boss and I was still an account executive, was in the sales world, in the tech space. And I got a lead for a company that was a viable company that appeared to be a quality lead that met a lot of our discovery points, right? So I'm reaching out to them, and I went to my sales manager at the time, and I said, help me with this. Help me make this conversation go from good to great. And I sensed that he was annoyed. So I went back to him again and said, help me more. I'm not getting what I need. I don't even know what I need. So help me. Maybe let's role play this. And I was bugging him. And that was the philosophy. And, according to my kids, maybe I can be very strong and sometimes a bulldozer, but I know that I needed help. And I felt unseen, unheard, irrelevant, like that my own sales manager, whose quota depends on my success or fail, was not interested in helping me. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he didn't know how. Don't know. But I would call that a bad manager. Now I'm going to give you an example of a toxic manager and then an excellent, stellar manager. Toxic manager, there's 8 of us on the senior leadership team, and we're in a leadership meeting, and the senior VP of sales asks one of us for their opinion, did not like the answer, responded to that person and said, Sean, I didn't know you were a fucking idiot. And he was not joking. And you could just hear a pin drop. Like, my memory is nobody said a word for like 30 seconds. That's a toxic manager. One of the best managers I ever had. His name is Brent Burns. He went on to be a CEO of some other companies, and I believe now he's retired. Brent Burns, he served in the military. I'm always fascinated by how much military service shows up in leadership, in excellent leadership. And let me just tell you briefly, because I know I'm talking a lot, what he did I was already employed. No, he hired me. And he was fairly new to the company, and a couple months later, he was still new, and I'm brand new. He called his entire organization in for a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning. And the point is, he called his entire organization in for a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning. At 7:59, he got up and he put a chair underneath the door handle, thereby locking any late people out of this meeting. One whole wall was glass where you could see people walking down the hall. And I remember there were like 5 or 6 stragglers. They're walking up and they're walking fast and they're jiggle, and the door does not open. And Brent, he had his back to the door. And he said, "Good morning, welcome, blah 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 blah, and this is what we're doing, and this is blah blah blah." And he's like, "Now you may have noticed there's some people da da da. My request is, when we say 8 a.m., please be here at 8 a.m. if you'd like to be a part of this team." But he said it in such a way with, I will tell you my expectations. I want to hear your expectations of me, and let's live by those expectations together. And guess how many people were late ever again? Beautiful. That's leadership, in my opinion. He was also the kind of leader that said, okay, Jen, here's a problem I'm hearing. How do you want to handle it? Or I would come to him because he created that space. And I would say, here's what's happening with my team. I've got two solutions, A and B. What do you think? And he would say, which one do you like? And I would say, well, I like A because blah, blah, blah. He said, go do it. Let me know how it goes. Let me know what you need from me. Amazing. But he set that expectation, not to come in and dump problems, but you're going to have problems. How are you going to show up and manage those problems? What's your solution going to be? How can I help you be a better you? Don't come to me to solve your problems and tell you what to do. Amazing, amazing, amazing leader.
Yeah. Before we get to talk to one, I was reminded of, and I may misquote it, but there's a quote by Colin Powell with your first story about how your manager couldn't be bothered to help you when you were specifically asking for support from him, and how that made you feel. And I'm sure after that you didn't bring any problems to him, right? Because why would you? And the Colin Powell quote basically says, "When your people stop bringing you their problems, you've lost them." Right?
Yeah,
And that's what I thought of with that. Is like, sometimes as leaders, we're like, why they gotta bring, it's like, no, that's your job. Like,
that's your
it's
job,
your
buddy.
job to support them. That is leadership. And conversely, if you're not hearing, I used to say that bitches, gripes, complaints go up and solutions come down. And if they stop coming up, something's really wrong.
Something's broken.
Something's broken. Yeah.
I love that Colin Powell quote. I love that. That's so awesome. It's so true. I heard something recently also, a guy I really like and respect here in Houston, Texas, and he's the CEO. I think his company's now like 275 million. It's a software development shop. He's a tremendous leader. And I heard him speak recently. And he said, hey, man, if you can't trust your people, they shouldn't be your people. Boom. Shakalaka, boom, boom. I was like, mic drop, you're done.
No, yeah, it's a foundation of everything. And then I love the second example about, the leader executive who said, hey, it's 8 a.m. and he holds you to that time standard. Because I was actually at a conference, CEO Life conference. Or actually, no, sorry, this was a Chief Executive Network conference I was at 2 weeks ago, and had a guest speaker. And he was great. He's a best-selling author, but he got his start as a high school hockey coach, right? So like, was this guy talking to CEOs? Now he's a university professor, but he's kind of famous because this hockey team in Michigan was literally the worst hockey program in the country.
Oof.
It was like, out of like 1,324 teams in the country, they were rated 1,324, right? So like the worst. They hadn't won a game in like 3 years. They're
Oi.
awful. And, he got the job over probably a more highly qualified person. And he stepped in and said, I think it was Huron Hockey. He's like, welcome to Huron Hockey, the hardest working team in the country. And you might think like, you're going to take these kids who have been losing and you're going to lose them all, right? No one's going to show, I got to work the hardest and we're losing. And what actually happened was the complete opposite, right? Like, everyone showed up for the voluntary workouts. He turned the program around. They became a top 30 program in the country in like 3 years. And, it reminds me of there's kind of a famous talk by Nick Saban where he says, winners want to be around winners. And so I think it's just such a important aspect of leadership that, I think God, this is going to be a dense podcast. I can sense it already, because there's, I say there's two things as a leader that you can never delegate: decision-making and cultural development. That's on you. You can't delegate either one of those things. And setting that cultural expectation, and sometimes, which will kind of lead us, this is a nice lead into sort of my next question for you, which is around, especially in sort of this, with maybe generational differences and everything else. But at the end of the day, I still believe that people want to be on winning teams. People want to be pushed. They want to be developed. They don't want to be coddled. And so if you set high standards and high expectations, sure, some people are going to leave, but more often than not, people are going to rise to that level. And that's your job as a leader, to establish this is the standard. And no matter what, I'm holding you to that. And the final example he gave on that was, one of his mentors was a hockey coach, and he had this kid on the team. It's like one of those traveling hockey teams, and this kid now is like in the is like NHL MVP. I mean, top recruit, right? Like, and they were going to this big tournament in Buffalo. They were going to drive across Canada, Buffalo, and there was going to be international teams and NHL and scouts and college scouts there. They're by far their best player. He said, "Hey, I don't say who's late, who comes. The bus schedule does." And it was like 5 a.m. The bus leaves. This kid is like, he's like 5 a.m. close the bus or I start leaving. Their star player's not there. He runs up and is banging on the door to get in, and they just left him.
Whoa.
And to your point, exactly, it's like, and that was at the beginning of the season, right? Like early season. He's like, but the rest of the season, everyone was 30 minutes early. And so the standard's the standard. And
Yeah.
and I think that space can be hard for some leaders to hold. And so when you work with leaders, and especially on sales teams, like, what is that balance between compassion and assertiveness and holding standards?
So I'm thinking of a couple of specific examples with some current clients. I have one client who's CEO of his software company. And when we were introduced, I said to him, why are we talking? What is it you're looking for? And he was also running the sales organization at the time. So he was like a founder leader, a founder led sales leader as well. And I said, why are we talking? And he said, because I have enough awareness to recognize I'm not connecting with my employees, specifically the sales team. And his perspective was the sales team. And that at that stage of their business was the heartbeat of the organization. Like they needed the sales. And first of all, I just paused to acknowledge him for having enough awareness to say, I must be the problem. I'm not connecting with my employee base, especially my sales reps. That's a problem if I want to remain CEO and if I want to grow and scale this company. So having that kind of awareness is huge versus someone who has more ego than awareness and may have a you can't teach me nothing perspective, which I choose not to work with people of that mindset. But so number one is having some sort of awareness. That's the make or break. The second thing is I go deep on how you receive and give and really respond to hard feedback, because feedback is not just, I hate when people say criticism. It's constructive, in my opinion. It's also positive, but it's the constructive part that can be hard to hear. So I want to know from my clients, the sales leaders, how do you give and receive feedback? And how do you give and receive constructive feedback? And I want concrete examples of a time when your wife, your husband, your partner, your boss, your underling, someone at the restaurant, whatever, gave you feedback that really pissed you off. How did you handle it? What did you say? What did you not say? What was your body language doing? Because that's part of my job, is to say, Sean, you've already done some amazing things. What do you think's in the gap? And then I'm going to tell you where I think your baby's ugly. And that's what you're paying me for. You're not paying me to be your gold. You want a best friend, go get a Labrador, a golden retriever, or if you want to be liked, go work at an ice cream shop. If you want to be respected, you have to be able to give and receive constructive feedback and have difficult conversations and manage conflict. And I want concrete examples of those things, because if you're not coachable, we best not engage. I'd rather you save your money and save both of our time. I'll take your money if you insist, but that's not being a good human, right? If I don't think so. Part of all that is to say the importance of me saying, and I don't just say it once, I might say it 7 to 10 times over the course of 6 months, is what are my expectations of you and what are your expectations of me? I don't just roll it out one time, because we now have the attention span of even less than a goldfish, like 6 seconds versus 8 seconds or something like that. So repetition, consistent repetition of the expectations and the standards, that also minimizes surprises. Well, I rolled out the PowerPoint in our kickoff meeting in month 1 of Q1. How could you not know? Well, are they listening? How do you make sure they're listening? Do you pause and say, Sean, what did you just take away from that particular topic? Tell us more. Tell us why. What did you like about the comp plan? What do you not like about the comp plan? But asking versus telling, and consistent, repeatable setting of expectations, the standards, it's not a one-time, one-hit wonder. All the time, over and over.
Because sales
Did that even was
leader.
that well, I forgot what the question was. I just kept going on a good tangent. So keep me accountable here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you did, and
Okay.
I think as a leader, when we look at that, how I think you brought up a few things. I asked about balancing compassion and assertiveness, and I think
That's right.
right, and so I think that being consistent, being clear, people. I think the worst thing, people don't hate change; they hate ambiguity,
Mm,
and
it's a
so
good one.
being really clear and consistent with people allows you to be more assertive, maybe speak to the compassion side of that. What does
Mm.
compassionate leadership look like? Because I mean, sales is notorious, right? For like, it's competitive, it's driven, it's metrics, and people get into sales because, right? Like, man, I'm trying to remember. I was having this conversation with some other coaches, actually know some clients around it, and it was, motivating the sales team. It's like, look, sales teams are motivated, but this is my opinion. So this is your expertise. So tell me how off I am on this. But sort of three things: money, public recognition, and competition. Like a good salesperson is motivated by one of those. Like that's what I've seen. Like those are the people who want to get into sales. And I think if you have a salesperson who you can't find one of those three, like you can't put them up on a leaderboard and they don't care where they're at, or they don't care that they're doing good, and they have that motivation to just like, I'm good at my job, or I'm getting better, or they don't care. I get my bonus, I hit my commission, whatever. Like, you're gonna have a hard time getting that person to perform in sales, is what I've found. So it could be this sort of like cutthroat, black and white type of environment. But what does compassionate leadership look like in sales?
Such a great question. So I agree. It's fair to assume sales reps are commonly motivated by either of those three or some combination. It is on the sales leaders not to assume it's any one of those or a combination of those three, but to ask every week, what's motivating you this week? At the end of every quarter, what motivated you this quarter? What's motivating you next quarter? Rather than assuming. And I have a client who said, well, I have a PhD in organizational dynamics and blah, blah, blah. And I know that this is what motivates this person. And I just kept pushing, saying, how do you know? When did you ask? Do you want to be accountable? Let's go ask. When are you going to ask? When are you going to come back to me with their answer? You don't know. We're not omnipotent. You don't know. You're making assumptions. Where else are those assumptions tripping you up? Maybe you're assuming this person's coin operated, but all they want is to earn a monthly lunch with the CEO, right? Or you said public recognition, or attaboy, attagirl, or to be team lead, to get promoted. But you've got to ask. And so I would put that under compassionate coaching, or compassionate selling is truly showing your team on a consistent basis that you are invested in their success, which is not words, it's the actions. Sean, we're going to have a 25-minute coaching. That's not about deal strategy or an upset prospect. That is coaching, where I am investing in what's working for you right now and what's not working by asking you, what are you doing well? Where do you think your challenges are? I'm going to share my observation, but we've got a much better chance of you, when you acknowledge it and state it out loud, that that's what we work on and that's what you improve. It's got to come from you. So that's all about, asking. And so many leaders are so stuck in the telling because that's how they grew up or came up, versus there's a time and place to tell, of course, but to ask consistently, you're going to build trust quicker. And that trust, when the sales reps trust in their leaders, they perform better, period.
I think trust is the foundation of it's really all of leadership and high performing teams.
Hmm.
That's one question I get asked or about a lot is, commanded two different Green Beret attachments, and sort of what makes them, I have a whole keynote, like what makes them different, right? Like
Oh,
different than
yeah.
and other teams. And at the foundation of it is trust. Is they trust that I'm going to put the mission first, but people always, and I'm going to take care of them and not accomplish mission at their expense, not take credit, that I'm going to give credit to the team, and that we both have mutual trust that if our bonds our word, and if we say something's going to get done, it gets done. And so I think that's so important. And I just want to do a call out on one thing you brought up that I maybe hadn't thought of, that I think is important for leaders, which is asking regularly, I think you even mentioned weekly or quarterly or monthly, about what's motivating you, because that does change. And I think about my wife, who is a senior sales manager in a tech company, and we're expecting our first child right now, and what her motivations are right now versus 2 years ago, or a year ago, changed. What matters
Changes.
and what's going to motivate her at work is different, right? Like life, so it could be, the role stayed the same, the team stayed the same, the metrics stayed the same, but something, if you don't ask, outside of life changes. All of a sudden, oh, actually, I'm taking care of my parents. I've got a sick child. I've got a health thing. I've got whatever else, or my spouse just exited and now we're millionaires. Guess what? The monthly commission doesn't mean so much anymore. You're like, whatever that might be, those types of things change over time.
Yeah.
And I think that's really easy to make assumptions, not just about what original motivations might be, to your point, but how that might change over time as life happens.
Absolutely, because that's it. Life is happening. Maybe you hire the kid right out of college and he's in a 1-bedroom apartment. Then he starts dating somebody and they want to move into a 2-bedroom. Then they get married and they want to buy a house. Then they have a baby. And I mean, never mind the flow. The flow is erratic and such, but you don't know leaders unless you ask. And the second thing I want to add, in addition to asking on the regular to have consistent check-ins, is the importance of sales leaders, of leaders, to know and acknowledge out loud all the fine points of your team's life outside of work. Like, it is important for me that I wanted to know the name of your son, which is Hudson Tate Patton. And look what's happening right there. What just happened to your face?
Smile, we connected, right?
Yeah, exactly. You felt seen and heard, and I could see that in your face. And that took what, 3 seconds? And so I've got a client, I'm like, you don't need to learn all these details. Have your virtual assistant reach out to everybody and calendar it and maximize automation, and systematize all that you can, so that when you do reach out to them each month and say, hey, happy birthday, here's a note. Hey, I'm going to be in town. Let's go to whatever. You're investing in their success. You're making them feel seen and heard. And that will lean into trust and loyalty, and people perform better. Yeah.
So what's one, would you say, major myth that about sales and leadership that you want to dispel?
And this is sales leaders. You've all heard this one. You've seen this, and it may even be you. When we promote a top seller into management, A, you're screwing yourself out of your quota. B, are you super clear that this rep wants to move into management? C, what tools and systems and training and coaching are you providing for this person to step into leadership? It is not the same to be a rep and then manage 8 reps and an $8 million quota versus a $1 million quota. It is not the same. I see so many fails. I see so many mid-level managers that don't know what to do. And so they end up job hopping a lot, 18 to 20 months at a time, as opposed to taking the time to really invest deeply. I see that all the time. And often those managers, they regret it. They will bounce around, and they don't know. It's a delta. It is a learning curve. It's no longer all about you. It's about them. It's a completely different mindset and operating rhythm. Coaching yourself or coaches, I mean, it's a whole different thing. I would say that's the biggest, and I see it time and time again. Yep. Don't do that.
So I agree with you. And it's interesting you bring that up because, as entrepreneurs and business coaches, right, we try different things. And what the market wants is not always what you think the market needs. And so I had an experience because I see the same thing, not just in sales orgs, although I think it's very apparent in sales orgs, but almost all mid-sized companies that don't have some sort of internal leadership development program, which, to be fair, right? Like there's a major, Fortune 500 company here in Nashville, and they have a massive leadership development team, right? Like just learning development team. They got 12 PhDs and and they're thinking all the time, and they've got their belt program to level up at each level where they get trained internally, and it's awesome.
Mm.
And they wanted to bring me in to work with their senior level on public speaking and communication. But you go to a company, even a company that does 500 million, like 300 million, to some people that's a big company. And as far as the world or the nationally, that's still a small or medium-sized business. But you might have 500 people. What I see too is exactly you're talking about is there's no program. It's just the assumption that you're good at this level. So that means you're ready for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no formal program to actually train you to be successful there. And for those of you maybe who are familiar with the Peter principle, that's what that is, right? That's you're promoted to the point of incompetence.
That's right.
And man, I just see it so much. And so I developed, shameless plug here, I developed an entire curriculum, 5 levels of leader, what you need to train at each level, self-leadership for individual contributors, one-on-one leaders, leaders of leaders, cross-functional operational level leaders and strategic leaders. And I put this out, and at least in my putting it out there wasn't a huge appetite for it. And
Mm,
I'm just wondering, like, what do we do, or it's clearly something that everyone I've talked to, almost like, and yourself included, you're seeing it. This is critical to these company successes. Do you see examples of companies investing in it and bringing in like a fractional leadership development program, or like how do we solve this? Because take out just the business success part of it. I have an underlying belief in my business that everyone deserves inspiring leadership.
yes.
And to your point, you've had great bosses, you've had terrible bosses, and your life at home, your experience of life itself is enhanced when you have great leadership. And I think it's
Mm,
inherent to who we are as human beings. So like what do we do, and how do we get these companies to buy in, or is there a solution? Like what do we do to help solve this problem, like almost at a systemic level?
mm. Woof. Boy, if I could just blurb that right out, we would be on the Oprah Winfrey circuit here, and that's amazing. But a couple things do come to mind. Number one is, through the more experience I get, the more I'm attracted to companies that support the concept of conscious capitalism, that it's people first, people then profit. That's the kind of leader that I want to be associated with, that I want to work with and coach and grow with them, because people first, people then profit. Both equally important, but in that order. In order to get to the profit, you got to have good people, versus when there's a merger or there's an acquisition, give me the spreadsheet and let me just X out. These people got to go, period. So it's got to, somebody at the leadership level has to believe in the humanity first. And I don't mean that to sound schmaltzy, but I truly believe it's your people drive your numbers. So sales leaders, if you're not investing in your people, why would you expect them to achieve quota or exceed quota? Leaders, if you put your profit first, they know that. So people then profit. And that's a certain kind of individual. And I like to see if I can get to that as quickly as possible. And if we're not a match, then I will refer you to someone else. But the overarching answer is, I would say, with one human at a time, asking those kinds of questions. What do you do for professional development internally? How do you promote your senior ops person to the COO? What are you going to do? How do you fill that gap for them? Do you give them money to go take a course? Do you have an internal resource? Do they get to shadow the current COO before they leave? Like, what is, maybe they're not even, it's almost like succession planning on some level, but what is your, yeah. And for those that say they got nothing, that's a different conversation if they're willing to have that conversation. I'm thinking of some people that view that as a cost center concept versus a revenue center. You got to have the belief. The leader has got to believe in it.
I love that, because if you're what I say too is, if you don't have an internal program, or use a third party or something to level up and train people for the next level of leadership, if you don't have that, and so therefore you're not going to develop great leaders internally, then you're going to rely on external hires to come in. And if you tell me that that's the right answer the majority of the time, what you're telling me is that you're going to trust your competitors to train your leaders better than you can.
Interesting.
And it's like, is that a successful business model?
And is that a long-term model, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. Or is
yeah.
that going to help you just go right out of business? Yeah, it's fascinating. I think the one person at a time.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that. What do you hope the legacy will be for soft sell coaching?
that's such a great question. And I'm going to cheat. I've got two things. These both happen to be gifts from my daughter. And this sits right on my desk, which is this. She says, Mama, when I saw this, this is you. Talk about
Difference
filling
maker.
my love tank right there. I want to be able to continue to, I have two words. Like, I remember your words, Sean, for 2025 are simplicity and focus. And that's beautiful. My words for 2025 are impact and growth, both that I put out to my clients, which I then receive back. So, said a different way, and I want to ask you the same question. What words would you like to see written on your tombstone? And for me, it's, in addition to loving mother and parent and spouse and friend and all the things, she made an impact and she helped people grow. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I think similarly, I think I am driven sometimes what I'm working on is to an extreme, but still driven by this concept of I'm so grateful for the life that I've been granted
Mm,
that I feel an inherent moral obligation to make it matter. And to me, I have these what I call my two life maxims, which is sort of my guideposts for life and decision making are maximize my experience, my own personal experience of life, because I think there's value
mm,
just in that,
yeah.
and maximize my impact on others. And if I can live a life that's guided by that, those two principles, I think it clears up a lot in terms of like legacy and decisions, right? Like you're like, do I go left? Do I go right? Well, is this, because I think it's okay because I wasn't good at this for a long time, especially my time in the military, maybe and a lot of veterans, I know a lot of people in service jobs, like whether it's like clergy, healthcare, teacher, coach, whatever, they pour into others so much and they don't pour into themselves. And a lot of times it leads to them believing that they're not worthy of that. Like they're only worthy of pouring into others and no one's pouring into them and they're not pouring into themselves. And I went down that path for a part of my life. And so I transitioned out of the military and doing some more reflection and mindfulness and really coming back to it's okay to do things just because I enjoy them and it enriches my life. And for no other reason than just it's the experience of a rich life and fulfillment in itself is a worthy pursuit. And then how do we balance that with, but I also feel we have this inherent moral obligation to maximize our impact on others because I still believe, maybe this is the soldier in me, right? That, the only thing it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And so I don't think it's okay to your point, it's just profit, it's just numbers. It's like, is that a life? Is that the legacy? Is that what is, if everyone did that, would the world be better or worse?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I think that's, I don't know if that was kind of a long answer to your question, but I think that for me, it's, maybe it is, maybe it's, he maximized his experience of life and he maximized his impact on others. And like, if I can, on my last breath, think back that and know with confidence I did that, I think I'll leave with a smile on my face.
That's powerful. Good stuff. Good stuff. Who do you follow? Who motivates you?
Oof, that's a good question. I it kind of shifts a bit. I find a lot of motivation in a lot of different places and different areas of my life. So I follow a lot of conscious leadership people and books. I for like mindfulness and spiritualness, I follow a lot of Buddhist practices, stuff like that.
Mm.
In terms of my motivation to keep going, I or just like make a difference. I love Scott Galloway. In terms of business, I like Alex Hermosi. I'm trying to think of others. I mean, honestly, I'm trying to think of a lot of my motivation just comes from people in my life, like not
Yeah.
not necessarily famous people, but just
That.
the people around me that motivate me. And I try to put myself around people who are also not being apathetic, who are have similar values and are pushing themselves, but in a healthy way and like from a place of positivity. What
Mhm.
about you? What about you?
That's the jam right there. Yes. Super intentional. The older I get, the more I cut people out, which may sound cold, but if it's the wrong kind of person that tolerates me versus supports me and that does not level themselves up, ain't nobody got time for that. Life is, I'm very intentional the older I get with surrounding myself with value alignment that we push, we want to move forward, we drive forward with intent because it fuels us and we see how it fuels others. Super, super, super important. And then you mentioned her earlier, my dear friend Catherine Brown, who's powerful queen. She reintroduced to me. I forgot about this guy. Joe Dispenza is from mindfulness, and he's got things that are 10 minutes all the way to 50 minutes. And every morning now with my coffee and my eggs, I am picking something from him. I really step into it. So I'm grounded, I'm positive, I'm worthy, I got this. I do have a love affair with Oprah Winfrey and I follow a lot of her podcasts. And I learned about Mel Robbins through her, which she's
Mel Robbins
also,
is awesome too.
she's a
Yeah, she's
powerful
great.
queen. So but to your point, yeah, the people that I surround, I'm very intentional with who I want in my corner and whose corner I want to be in. Yeah. It's good stuff. What a great good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. What would be you've got someone who's a business leader right now and wants to make a change. What's one simple way that leaders can, or one simple step that leaders can take today to lead more authentically through connection?
So I'm going to paraphrase that in Jen speak, but maybe it is as simple as some tactical homework that could help expand their perspective, because that's often so it can be closed, right? We think we know, we see the world through our lens, but how do I see the world through your lens? As a successful leader, I need to meet each one of you where you're at, not expect all of y'all to meet me. And that's a perspective. So one thing that I like to do, that it may be a quick hit, but it's uncomfortable. There's a couple things. Number one, for 10 seconds for 5 days, I don't have my phone, or I would just demonstrate, but you are recording yourself saying 10 seconds of affirmations in the mirror, and you send that to me. 10 seconds for 5 days. And if you like it, I like to push. Then we move to 30 seconds for 5 days. And we keep going. And then you have a whole library of your own affirmations that you can pull up at any time. And that can help psychologically, it can help slowly shift your mindset. Something else I like to do is for 7 days, eat with your use a fork with your non-dominant hand for 7 days for every meal, because it's so awkward and so uncomfortable and you make a mess. Welcome to life, welcome to growth, welcome to making a change and stepping into discomfort. And then you look back and you're like, man, I did that for 7 days. I rock. I can do anything. And these subtle things, if you do the work, expand your mindset so you can hear others with more authenticity, and you can adapt and meet your people where they're at with less ego and more intention. I don't know if that makes sense, but those are two sort of tactical takeaways that can help expand your mindset, expand your perspective.
I love it. I love it. Super actionable, super tactical, and
Yeah. I'm
impactful.
about doing. I love strategy, but if ain't nobody roll up their sleeves and do the doing, strategy doesn't happen. You got to have people that do things. So it's the doing, the tactics. Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jen, this has been fantastic. And I know when we first started, you're like, oh man, it's been 40, 45 minutes. And look at us, we're past that. And I feel like we could do this for another 3 hours. But if people want to learn, more about you and soft sell coaching, because they want to learn more about you, maybe working with you, where should they go?
Go to my website, softsellcoaching.com. Hit me up on the contact form. It's a very simple, clean, user-friendly website. DM me on LinkedIn. I pretty much live on LinkedIn. And that's amazing. And my cell phone is on my LinkedIn profile. I welcome phone calls. I challenge you, because often people don't anymore. I challenge you to pick up the phone and call me.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll get your voicemail flooded here with a bunch of awesome people that want to talk to you. So, man, Jen, this has been fantastic. I love learning and getting to know you even more during this time. So thank you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Sean. Loved it.